page 45. In our discussion so far, we have tried to define the position of the person as a subject and object of action, keeping in mind the specific context of those actions, the sexual context. The fact that a man and woman are persons in no way alters the fact that those persons are also man and woman. The sexual context, however, implies not only a static difference of sex, but the effective participation in human actions of a dynamic element intimately connected with difference of sex in human beings. Ought we to call it an instinct or an urge? The question concerns two words, which etymologically have, strictly speaking, the same meaning. For instinct comes from the Latin instigere, which means more or less the same as to urge. Hence, instinct means the same as urge. Okay, now I'm going to drop down to the bottom of the page. By instinct, the etymological meaning of which is identical with that of urge, we mean a certain mode of action which automatically declares its origin. This is the reflex mode of action, which is not dependent on conscious thought. It is characteristic of reflex action that the means are adopted without any conscious thought about deliberation on their relation to the end in view. Okay, now further down, then the italicized. Man is by nature capable of rising above instinct in his actions, and is capable of such action in the sexual sphere as elsewhere. Okay, now further down, I'm just picking out the points that kind of summarize what he's saying here. Second to last paragraph, down towards the bottom. The sexual urge in this conception is a natural drive born in all human beings, a vector of aspiration, along which their whole existence develops and perfects itself from within. Whoa. The sexual urge is a natural drive born in all human beings, a vector of aspiration along which their whole existence develops and perfects itself from within. Wow. So the sexual urge, being the strongest, is so because of two reasons. One has to do with our existence, our very existence. You know, we are urged, we have an urge to exist and perpetuate our existence. Why it's so strong. Without that, we don't exist. And secondly, it helps us to perfect ourselves within. So now sexuality helps to perfect ourselves. Now this is where we start to get, again, the philosophical perspective underpinning of why the church says what it says on a lot of issues. Sexuality is something that, when lived in according to the order, perfects a person. In other words, it helps a person to become the fullness of who they are called to be as a human being and individually. This is, again, why the church says that cannot accept things like same-sex marriage, or it calls same-sex attraction a disorder. It doesn't have the possibility to perfect a person, whereas ordered sexuality is ordered to perfecting. In other words, a man becomes a man, fully a man, only in relation to woman, not in relation to another man. Another man helps him become a man, but he becomes fully a man only in relation to woman. Now, woman can mean not just an individual woman, human, but can also mean, such as in my case, as a celibate priest, the church, which of course is personified in a sense as bride or womanhood for me. The perfection of myself as a person is dependent upon, my perfection as a person is dependent upon how I relate as a priest man to the church. Without the church, I cannot be perfected, the person I am. The person on this earth who is this Thomas Loya cannot pursue a path of perfection except in relation to the church. Okay, and because it's a spousal relationship for me in that regard, just as it is for a husband and a wife, man and woman. Okay, so the male-female, the spousal union, which later he'll call in Theology of the Body the fundamental element of human existence, that union is ordered to perfecting the two who are involved in it. And that's why it must be complementary in its nature. It has to be male and female in its nature for the perfection to happen. That's why that's why our sexual drive is so strong. It's everything. People crack on Christopher West sometimes because of his presentations. Oh, it's too sexual, whatever they say, you know, or even me. I say we're not sexual enough. In the right way. Not in the secular way. Got to stop thinking secular here. Think mystical. Think like the church. Sexual in its full meaning means spousal, and to be like God. We're not enough like God. We're not. So we have to be more sexual spousal. Okay, on the next page, we're going to start on page 47. The top there, the last sentence in the first paragraph. This is the point at which human freedom and the sex urge meet. Man is not responsible for what happens to him on the sphere of sex, since he is obviously not himself the cause of it, but he is entirely responsible for what he does in this sphere. Now, this is very helpful when it comes to temptations and lust, thoughts. A lot of people talk about, confess, bad thoughts or impure thoughts. And things like that happen to us. The key, though, is the choice made. Not the fact of the thought, but the choice made in light of the thought. And that's what he's saying here. Man is not responsible for what happens to him in the sphere of sex, since he is obviously not himself the cause of it, but he's entirely responsible for what he does in the sphere. The fact that the sexual urge is the source of what happens in a man, the various events which occur in his sensual and emotional life, independently of his will, shows that this urge is a property of the whole of the human existence, not just of one of its spheres or functions. This property permeating the whole existence of man is a force which manifests itself not only in what happens involuntarily in the human body, the senses and emotions, but also what takes shape with the aid of the will. So our sexuality is absolutely, totally integrated in us. It's replete in us. It is foundational. It's fundamental. And that's why all formation for vocation, whether marriage or celibacy, has to be taught through this prism. Because that's what it is. It's everything. Sexuality is everything. Let's face it. It's how we are like God. It's how we share in the one and great mystery of a God who created a bride for himself and then united himself lovingly with that bride. And all of life is just our sharing in that. There's nothing else. It all flows in and out of there. So, to understand ourselves in terms of the spousal element is to understand everything. Okay, the sexual urge is an attribute of the individual. Now here's a good one for, I always get this question after every talk I do, especially I'm talking about a lot about the theological, the theology of the body. In other words, the theological, the revelatory value of gender. That we are man and woman because it reveals God. Primarily, that's why we're man and woman. God reveals himself precisely through our gender. And I always get this question, which will be answered right here. Every human being is by nature a sexual being and belongs from birth to one of the two sexes. Okay, now here's the answer to the question I always get. The fact is not contradicted by the phenomenon of so-called hermaphrodism, any more than any other sickness or deformity militates against the fact that there is such a thing as human nature, and that every human being, even the deformed or sick human being, has the same nature, and is a human being precisely because of it. In the same way, every human being is a sexual being. And membership of one of the two sexes means that a person's whole existence has a particular orientation which shows itself in his or her actual internal development. This development, more easily observable in the organism than in the psyche, will be dealt with in greater detail in the final section of the book. Okay, did you get that? The hermaphrodites. You know, people always ask me, what about people born with both organs?
Today they're called intersex.
Intersex?
Yeah,
Today they prefer to be called intersex. Intersex. That's what they prefer to be called. Okay. The fact that they exist, does not change the order, the basic order that we are made male and female. And as he just said in here, it's also an internal thing too. There's an internal orientation as well. It's not just your body. It's your brain, chromosomes. And even with the hermaphrodism, oftentimes you're more one than the other. You're basically one with the parts of the other. There's another condition too. I can't remember. I can't call it up. Maybe I'll get it next time. That's similar to this, but there's another one like that. But anyway, it doesn't change this fundamental order any more than if I say to you, gravity is a fundamental element of creation. Gravity always pulls things down. And you might say, oh, that's not true. Because I was flying in the airplane the other day. I was defying gravity. So you can't say gravity always pulls. Gravity is not a fundamental element of our existence. Well, the fact that you were temporarily defying gravity, in a sense, does not change the fundamental order of the fact that gravity exists and still pulls things down. Same thing here. The exceptions, the disorders, deformities do not change the basic order. They're deformities. They're exceptions. They don't change the order. And furthermore, living life, regardless of what your body makeup is, we are designed as a human creature to live sexually, meaning spousally. This means making gift of self. Making a gift of self. So you live, and this is what I tell single people a lot too. They say, well, how does all this apply to me as a single person? Well, you're still designed to live spousally, even if you're single. In other words, go out of yourself, make gift of self, and receive others that way as well. It doesn't matter what your body parts, how perfectly they're developed or not. This is fundamental to the human creature, human person. So we are, in that sense, sexual, even if we're deformed, as it were, or disordered somehow. We still are by nature sexual. Because remember, sexual means, underneath it all, the foundation of it means we make a gift of self. We go from here outward in an intimacy, in a union, in a giving, in a giftedness, in something that's life-giving. And we receive others that same way. That's what sexuality is. So it's a universal, fundamental reality, which doesn't change, which physical things don't change it. They simply manifest that. But they don't change it. So let's go to 48. At the bottom, towards about 2/3 down that paragraph, towards the bottom of the page, I'm going to start with the sentence that says for in themselves. For in themselves, sexual differences in people seem to indicate only a division in terms of psychological and physiological attributes within the boundaries of the species man, analogous to the division within animal species. The urge to mutual completion which accompanies this division indicates that the attributes of each sex possess some specific value for the other. We may therefore speak of sexual values which are connected with the psychological and physiological structure of man and woman. So it's not, unlike the animals, it's not just psychological and physiological differences, but there is a certain value. In other words, a man, a human person, is attracted to a human female because of a value in her that is feminine and human. Not just because as an animal, oh, that's the mate, that's what I mate with. But there is a value. And of course, value belongs to the world of that which is mystical or invisible. And remember, mystical things or visible things are the most real. They're the most real. It's just that they have to be made manifest through the physical. So the physical woman, man looks at a woman, what is he attracted to? He's attracted to the value of femininity as well as her person. But that value, which existed before the woman, that value is incarnated, concretized, manifested, expressed, participated in through her entire physiology as a woman. And the same thing with a man. You get it? Because that's what the animals don't have. They're not attracted to the value of the feminine or masculine. Okay, on the top of 49. The sexual urge is something even more basic than the psychological and physiological attributes of man and woman in themselves, though it does not manifest itself or function without them. Basically what I said. Okay, this next paragraph has some interesting things here, especially in the same-sex thing. Moreover, the sexual urge in man and woman is not fully defined as an orientation towards the psychological and physiological attributes of the other sex as such. These do not and cannot exist in the abstract, but only in a concrete human being, a concrete man or woman. Inevitably, then, the sexual urge in a human being is always in the natural course of things directed towards another human being. This is the normal form which it takes. If it is directed towards the sexual attributes as such, this must be recognized as an impoverishment or even a perversion of the urge. If it is directed towards the sexual attributes of a person of the same sex, we speak of a homosexual deviation. Still more emphatically do we speak of sexual deviation if the urge is directed not towards the sexual attributes of a human being, but towards those of an animal. The natural direction of the sexual urge is towards a human being of the other sex and naturally towards the other sex as such. Do you see the difference? Very big difference. It is just because it is directed towards a particular human being that the sexual urge can provide the framework within which and the basis on which the possibility of love arises. Because this urge is directed not just to mating, or not just to being satisfied, but towards a person, a particular human being. And that's what gives rise to the possibility of love.
You're going to have to repeat me for the people online, but it's striking me that this, he's almost like,
oh, yeah.
Hearing this passage, it strikes me that Karol Wojtyła, before 1960, was saying, you know, this whole concept of a sexual orientation in the generic sense doesn't make sense. It's a directedness toward another person, and not this kind of vague, you know, it's not toward this amorphous, you know, other. It's really a directedness toward a person.
Right.
No, there's something. I remember reading in a book about by a woman who had kind of gone the whole circle, and she'd been in a lesbian relationship most of her adult life, and then she found a lovely man and got married and had like 4 kids, and she was writing, she said, I still don't feel attracted to men. I'm attracted to my husband. That really strikes me in the same way.
Right. Yes, exactly. See, that's exactly what he's saying here. He so the sexual evolution, where it's separated out, unitive from the procreative and so on. Karawatiwa, he lived in a time in which he was seeing how this was where we were going. And he could see this by what was happening during his time. I call it the isms, communism, fascism, the world wars, the secularism, and so on. Because he had the ability to perceive that this is all very mechanistic. This is very dehumanizing. In other words, like the way the world was progressing and how it was seen. And that's why the sexual revolution, we tend to think of the sexual revolution as in a sense, it was a spike. Things move evolutionary, but there was a kind of a spike in the sexual revolution. But at the same time, it was an inevitable stage based on what was happening prior to that in the modern age. What was happening in the modern age, the dehumanization, the mechanism, the industrial revolution. A lot of these things were, and going all the way back, as Dr. Voltzing does so well in the Theology of the Body, his introduction, going back really 500 years, the scientific rationalists, where there was this progressive disintegration of seeing life, especially the human person. The physical and spiritual now start to be disconnected. And that's why he started out here attacking utilitarianism, in this book. In other words, meaning using. It's just an object. It's a person. It's a thing. Whatever. That's basically the same. You just see something. You want it for some reason, and you just take it and use it. And so this, but he's saying no. We're talking about a person, which is a whole different story now. Okay, the next paragraph. The sexual urge in man is a natural tendency to develop into love simply because the two objects affected with their different sexual attributes, physical and psychological, are both people. Love is a phenomenon peculiar to the world of human beings. In the outer world, only this sexual instinct is at work. Love is not, however, merely a biological, even a psychophysiological crystallization of the sexual urge, but is something fundamentally different from it. For though love grows out of the sexual urge and develops on that basis, and the conditions which the sexual urge creates in the psychophysiological lives of concrete people, it is nonetheless given its definitive shape by acts of will at the level of the person. Okay, so what we desire, our urges, yes, they're strong. They're the most strongest things in us. But they're given their shape. In other words, their true identity by acts of the will at the level of the person. I was counseling a young lady about her relationships, and she came to me again torn, confused, because she's faithful. She wants to be faithful, Catholic, but she's in this relationship, and there are times when they through their attractions like that they struggle with being virtuous. And so one of the things in the course of our conversation, I told her is that the key thing is in this relationship, she didn't know whether it was going to go towards marriage. Should she marry him? Should she not? Anyway, we went, after hearing it all, I said to her, the key is this: be honest to the situation. Be honest to, okay, what are the two of you? Are you married? No. Okay, then think in terms of what would be honest to that state. What belongs there, what doesn't belong there. what seeks to simulate it, and um, what actually then is more honest than simulating, or sort of almost like feigning marriage. I was talking about dating too. Like dating today has become simulated marriage, like mock marriage, because, and again, there's a dishonesty there, which is causing a lot of pain. And this is what a lot of people are. And in fact, one of the things I also told her, I said, you know what? I went through I took the whole honesty thing and went through the whole lot of things with her. But one of the other things I said to her was that don't even use the word dating. You say you're dating this guy, don't use the word dating. That's also part, I think, one of the mistakes. Because dating, in the way we understand it, live it today, is like mock marriage, in a sense. It's like marriage light. And one of the reasons is because it's very exclusive. There's two reasons. It's always these. The relationship becomes exclusive, and only marriage can really be an exclusive relationship. So right there, it's dishonest. And secondly, intimacy. It's a rush towards intimacy. You get intimate right away, physically, and that's how we date. Now that can only set you up for pain, and usually failure in a relationship. So if you back off the dating to say the more honest thing is this is a friend. This is a friend whom, yes, we have lots of things in common, things that we find attractive. And then as your friendship as a brother and sister in Christ develops, and you believe that there should be more and more, you're progressing more and more in a certain direction, that becomes, and here's a better word, let's replace dating with courtship. Courtship is where both of you acknowledge this relationship is one that is going to move towards marriage. And that's why we're seeing each other. Otherwise, we can bring in an element of exclusivity only because we're both truly thinking of marriage. But if you're not thinking of marriage, it shouldn't be exclusive and it shouldn't be intimate.
And by intimacy, you mean not
physical, yeah.
But all the other things.
Well, sexual, and also intimacy in terms of the expectations and demands that might be there if two people were married. In other words, you can't talk to anybody else. You can't date somebody else. You can't. You're gonna call me. You're gonna give me gifts. You're gonna, all the demands. None of that should be in the situation. And that will free you. It'll keep it very free, very fluid, and very honest, and you'll have clarity of vision in this. But anyway, there's a long-winded explanation about just this word, this approach, that this is a person. And that you keep it honest. Always remember this is another person. How do you relate to another person? First and foremost, another person, especially a person in Christ. You keep things honest. You want the best for them. You do only what will be for the best for them. You try to see them clearly, objectively. And that will help your relational life a lot.
This is kind of that my sister, my bride.
I was just going to say that. Yes, exactly. It's one of the things I told her. From Song of Songs, the most valuable things to know in relationships, especially married to married people. And John Paul does a whole lot on the Theology about it. You've ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. Well, they're after thinking to both and. How can you be sister and bride at the same time? Well, that's the key to a happy relationship. That person is always, first and foremost, a brother or sister to you, and specifically in Christ. How do you treat a brother and sister? No matter what. No matter what they've done or haven't done, I'm not talking about anything else aside. Just forget everything else. They're brother and sister, always, first and always. And that's your first part of relationship. Now, if you keep that in mind, then the spousal thing will start to work better.
Like people say at marriages, today I married my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Which I always thought was like really good because that's what it should be first. It should be
yes.
Friends, not just the physical attachment.
Right, exactly.
And then there's really nothing underneath there.
Right,
And then you end up hating each other maybe
precisely.
Down the line because you never worked on your relationship.
Right. And this thing, and especially for this, women, young ladies, listening, especially for the young ladies too. It helps to put them in a win-win situation. Like the young lady I was talking with, the way they're relating, the two of them relating, I said, you're putting yourself in a either-or situation. So this either has to go towards marriage, or if it doesn't, you're going to be heartbroken. I said, now you don't want to do that. You don't want to bring pain into your life that's unnecessary. If you back off and reapproach it with this idea of the person and honesty, you're win-win. Because at the very least, maybe you just have an enriching friendship that can always be, with no demands put on it. You know, that's one of the signs of a real friendship is nobody you don't expect that Christmas card. You forgot my birthday. You know, there's no demand. There's no strings attached. You know. That's the best friendships. You know. So that way you win. If it goes to marriage, you win. If it doesn't, well, you've had a rich relationship, a friendship. Okay. Find the bottom of the page. For although love grows out of the sexual urge, develops on the basis and in the conditions which the sexual urge creates in the psychological lives of concrete people, it is nonetheless given its definitive shape by acts of will at the level of the person. Okay. On the next page, page 50, there's a point there on the halfway down the paragraph. The sexual urge in man functions differently from the urge in animals, where it is the source of instinctive actions governed by nature alone. In man, it is naturally subordinate to the will, and ipso facto subject to the specific dynamics of that freedom which the will possesses. The sexual urge can transcend the determinism of the natural order by an act of love. So that's something our world doesn't understand. And the whole Freudian thing, he gets into that too, that we'll see later on. This is an urge. You can't resist it, you just act on it. And to say otherwise is, quote unquote, unnatural. Actually, it's unnatural as a human being to act totally on urges and instinct. Because what's natural to the human being is will and freedom of will, the ability to transcend the fallen aspects of the natural order. That's what's natural to being a human. Further down, it says, all this is possible because psychologically the sexual urge does not fully determine human behavior, but leaves room for the free exercise of the will. Now, bottom of 50, there, last few lines. Man is at once a social being and a sexual being. It follows that the rules governing the coexistence and association of persons of opposite sex are part of the general code regulating the life of human beings in society. You know, we always get picked on the church for the rules, these archaic rules, you know. Well, society has rules. It needs rules. It needs rules that even govern our sexuality, right? Like, isn't prostitution still illegal? Yeah, isn't pedophilia still illegal? Why? How can the state impose its rules, its archaic rules on us? Well, for the good of society.
So, for example, people who accuse Catholics of, or Mormons or whoever, like, okay, you say you're not imposing your morality on us, but you fight in the political sphere for things like against gay marriage. So could we say that at that point, and I think it's a little different maybe even for priests and sisters, because lay people are, you know, that's what they are. They're lay people. They're called to transform the secular order. And I think if priests, especially priests being part of the hierarchy in the official church, get involved in this kind of, you know what I mean, like political action, or just advising and guiding people towards making good choices in the political sphere. So to answer that objection, would you say, well, at this point we're acting as citizens for the common good, and that's why we're not imposing our Catholic Church morality on you or anything, because it's more a fundamental morality. It's not specifically like Catholic,
but we're doing this for the common good as citizens, as human beings.
Yes, Sister Elena, that is precisely how we're arguing in California for the Proposition 8 against why we believe there should not be same-sex marriage legalized, or recognize same-sex unions in marriage. It's based upon not, because that's what they're trying to say, exactly what you're saying. You just paraphrased precisely the battle going on in California, which is, of course, the model of battle going on, and probably will go on everywhere in our country. That they're saying, no, you're imposing your religion on us. No, we are advocating for the good of society, which, yeah, it happens to be the same thing that we Catholics believe, but it's not about imposing our religion. Which is why I don't like to call Catholicism religion. It's a way of seeing the natural order. That's all.
We have questions online here. Is this the natural law argument? And if we take the same-sex argument to its conclusion in 30 years, we'll have kind of two things: natural law,
yes,
and
yeah,
taking the same-sex argument to its conclusion in 30 years.
Okay, so they said, is this a natural law, and also what is the taking the same-sex argument to a natural conclusion 30 years from now? Yeah, it is natural law, and remember, natural law means our intellectual and subjective engagement of the created order, of the laws of nature, as it were. In other words, we're simply looking at how nature works. We're perceiving that, we're engaging that intellectually and by our experience, and then coming to certain conclusions that are irrefutable. Not because they're our conclusions, because the conclusions basically present themselves. Again, like gravity. If I experiment with gravity, I will always get the same result. Correct? I mean, I can jump off a bridge, I can do all kinds of things. No matter how I experience it, subjectively experience it, and as I think about it, I can come to the conclusion, or it gives me its own conclusion, that gravity always pulls things down. That's natural law. And it's the same thing with sexuality. The same-sex thing, if you take that to its conclusion, well, anything will be so-called marriage. We can call anything marriage now. Yeah, we should. And as we articulate it, our platform, it'll sound remarkably similar to the Constitution, Declaration of Independence.
By the time the chat room at 7 a.m. having trouble with it, so they may have.
Okay. Okay, Sister Anne's having a little bit of trouble with the chat room, so we'll stand by and to work it out. All right. Let's now at the very top of 51, I caught something right. Oh,
like supposedly Obama is a constitutional lawyer. But he says the Constitution is fluid, like it changes. But it doesn't if it's based on unchanging principles.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Sister said that President Obama stands on the platform of that I'm a constitutional lawyer and the Constitution is fluid. No. Because if it's based on natural law, it's based on the inalienable rights of the human person. It's based on the view of the human person. So that does not change. That is not fluid. It's something similar to like we do in the church, which is what John Paul II did. He's looking at non-fluid things, unchanging things, but in new ways. You can look at them in new ways. You can articulate them in new ways, but you apply them to new things, but you cannot change what is unchangeable, what does not change. And there's a big difference. And if the Constitution is fluid, what does that mean? It means it can become whatever we want it to become. Then in a sense, it doesn't exist. It becomes a moot. It's pointless. It's whatever you want it to be in whatever era. Then it fails to be a constitution. The Constitution is like the church teaching, like we do with the fathers of the church. You have to have touchstones of any kind of like organization. Just like when you're in clubs or even like religious orders. What do they do when they want to renew? They don't look forward, they look back. They go back to touchstones. They go back to what was the original charism and how do we now apply that to today? What do the fathers of the church say? How do we apply that to today? We have to have these touchstones that are, in a sense, unchanging. And that's what natural law is. You go back to what never changes, what can't change. I always tell people the church will change its teaching, guaranteed, on all these issues. You want the church to change. It will change. It will immediately change every one of its teachings when God changes the created order. So you need to talk to God. Then we'll change. At the very top of 51, I caught a little something that's going to crop up as part of one of my favorite quotes in Theology about it. That is the last sentence on the top paragraph of 51. Human life is in fact co-educational in many of its sectors. Eventually he'll finish that by saying about meaning knowing who man is for woman, who woman is for man. In other words, the meaning of gender. Okay, towards the bottom of this page, 51. There may be affection between people who are not sexually attracted to each other. Obviously, that is not the love of man and woman that determines the proper purpose of the sexual urge. The proper end of the urge, the end per se, is something suprapersonal, the existence of the species Homo, the constant prolongation of its existence. There is here a marked similarity to the animal world, to the diverse species which nature produces. The species Homo is part of nature, and the sexual urge operating within the species inserts its existence. Now, existence is the first and basic good for every creature. The existence of the species Homo is the first and basic good for that species. All other good derives from this basic good. I can only act while I am. Later on page 52, he says this. Unlike these, existence is not the proper and entire subject of any of the natural sciences, each of which merely takes existence for granted as a concrete fact inherent in the object which it studies. Existence itself is a subject for philosophy. I love this. He's basically saying, I'll tell the scientists, leave it to us. Leave it to the professionals. Existence itself is a subject of philosophy for which alone concerns itself with the problem of existence as such. An overall view of the sexual urge, which is so closely bound up with the existence of the species Homo and possesses, as has been said, an existential, not merely a biological character, is therefore the prerogative of philosophy. This is very important when we're trying to determine the true importance of the sexual urge, which has obvious implications in the realm of sexual morality. If the sexual urge has a merely biological significance, it can be regarded as something to be used. We can agree that it is an object for man to enjoy just like any other object of nature, animate or inanimate. But if the sexual urge has an existential character, it is bound up with the very existence of the human person, the first and most basic good. Then it must be subject to the principles which are binding in respect of the person. In the next paragraph at the bottom. On no account, then, is it to be supposed that the sexual urge, which has its own predetermined purpose in man, independent of his will and self-determination, is something inferior to the person and inferior to love. The proper end of the sexual urge is the existence of the species Homo. Its continuation and love between persons, between man and woman, is shaped and channeled, one might say, by that purpose and formed by the material it provides. And this is a good, the next few lines are good for understanding natural family planning. It can therefore take its correct shape only insofar as it develops in close harmony with the proper purpose of sexual urge. An outright conflict with that purpose will also perturb and undermine love between persons. People sometimes find this purpose a nuisance and try to circumvent it by artificial means. Such means, however, must have a damaging effect on love between persons, which in this context is most intimately involved in the use of the sexual urge. Okay, now right there gives the underlying philosophy, the philosophical foundation for the Church's teaching against contraception. We find the fact that, doggone it, this action, this urge that I have, always has a possibility of resulting in pregnancy. Well, I got to do something about that. I don't like that part. So they decide to circumvent it, he says, which has a damaging effect on the love between persons. That's why the Church is against it. Always remember, the key word is it hurts. It hurts because there's a dishonesty. All you got to do is step in the 8 zone, and you'll find your answers to everything. Honesty, called the H zone. Honesty, hurt, honesty, happiness. Or dishonesty, hurt, honesty, happiness. Okay, bottom of the page. This is in fact the character of true conjugal love between two persons, a man and a woman, who have consciously taken the decision to participate in the whole natural order of existence, to further the existence of the species Homo. Looked at more closely and concretely, these two persons, the man and the woman, facilitate the existence of another concrete person, their own child, blood of their blood and flesh of their flesh. This person is at once an affirmation and a continuation of their own love. The natural order of human existence is not in conflict with love between persons, but in strict harmony with it. Now he goes into different ways of the interpretation of the sexual urge. And always he cautions, which is one of the things I love so much about him, because it's one of my favorite themes, he cautions against the either-or perspective. You know, stop swinging between poles. You know, the sexual revolution was spawned in some part in reaction to prudishness, you know, Manichaean heresy, the sense that we couldn't, you know, talk about sex, and sex is basically this unmentionable thing. Lots of do's and don'ts about it. So there's rebellion against that. This is what Christopher West talks about in the person of, as an image, as a symbol of it, Hugh Hefner. That's why he talks about it. He uses it as an icon, an image to that kind of portrays or sums up in him as a person, what he's been about, this unsatisfactory swinging between poles. And of course, Hefner took the opposite pole as the answer, but in regard to the other pole. But at least he dramatizes or kind of symbolizes this unrest that we have, that something's wrong. Neither pole is right. Okay, so he calls this the rigorous interpretation. Page 54. In Catholic teaching, it has a profoundly religious significance. The established order of human existence, as of existence in general, is the work of the Creator, and not a work completed once and for all at the same moment in the dim past of the universe, but a work continually in progress. Okay, now we go down to the bottom. Their awareness, however, has a wider range and may be further extended in the same direction by the religious truth contained in the book of Genesis and the Gospels. A man and woman, by means of procreation, by taking part in bringing a new human being in the world, at the same time participate in their own fashion in the work of creation. They can therefore look upon themselves as the rational co-creators of the new human being. That new human being is a person. The parents take part in the genesis of a person. A person, of course, not really an organism. A human body is the body of a person because it forms unity of substance with the human spirit. Now, the next few lines is a great philosophical underpinning for why we're against abortion. The human spirit is not born merely in consequence of the physical union of man and woman in itself. The spirit can never originate from the body, nor be born and come into being in the same way as the body. The sexual relationship between man and woman is fundamentally a physical relationship, though it should also be the result of spiritual love. A relationship between spirits, which begets a new embodied spirit, is something unknown to the natural order. Nor yet can the love of man and woman, however powerful and profound in itself, do this. Nonetheless, when a human being is conceived, a new spirit is conceived simultaneously, united in substance with the body, which begins to exist in embryo in the mother's womb. If it were not so, it would be impossible to understand how the embryo could subsequently develop into a human being, a person. The answer to the human being is therefore, in the Church's teaching, the work of God Himself. That's one of our arguments about this thing. Well, it's just a fetus, it's a tissue. When does it become life? You know, they say, oh, when it implants and so. No, like you said here, how do you explain the fact that this, whatever you want to call it, inevitably develops in a human being? So it must be so from the beginning. Not just when we decide to call it human. Because it's not going to take another path. I said, well, we have to wait and see, because it could turn into a dog. You have to wait till it's like X amount in. Now it's a human being. Oh, well, he's going to get to it. I'm sorry. He's presenting the religious interpretation. I jumped ahead a little bit. He's going to come into the poles of rigorism, basically of being too rigoristic and too free about sexuality, sexual urge. Oh, yeah. First, he's establishing the religious interpretation.
Okay, this is back to contraception, and I was just down at UIUC, and we had a Stump the Catholics night, and we were talking about all this stuff, and the contraception thing was really hard for them to understand, because for them, we didn't get to fully flesh it out, but the idea of NFP or technical means was the same thing to them, because the intention is the same, but it's not exactly the same either. The intention isn't exactly the same either. So I'm just wondering if a way to express it would be, because we're saying JP2 is saying that to contracept, to use these technical obstructing means, I mean, they even had a hard time with the idea between abstaining and having sex while you're obstructing one of the ends of sex. For them, even that action, like the difference between not doing anything and doing something, was a big distinction. It was hard for them to even grasp that distinction. But could we say something that, because they don't understand, like, well, how does that damage the love relationship? If you're contracepting, you're still expressing love, you're still having sex, whatever. If we could tell them, like, the nature of love itself is open to love and life at all times. Otherwise, like, it's not love. And I find that they really respond to that, like, love and life, love and life. You can't separate those two things. It's so simple. It's so basic, because God is love and life. God is love. You can't split God in two. And I think we have this idea that we have to want a baby. Like, I have to have it all planned out. Like, I have to want this child, and the child has to come now, and because we control the rest of our lives, right? Whereas it's almost like, no, you just have to have this basic openness to life. And, yeah, maybe you don't want to have that kid right now, but you're going to want to. And then once the baby's born, you're not going to not love the kid and be like, well, I didn't really want you right now. It's like, the baby changes us, right, when it appears, right? So, okay, so maybe I think we need to talk, and I think maybe we're afraid to talk about this, I don't know, but the fact that also part of the nature of love is sacrifice, is sacrificial. The nature of God's love for us is sacrificial. It's not a joyride. Him loving us is not a joyride for him. You know what I mean? He died on a cross for us, it's like, so, but we're afraid to talk about that. And I mean, already married life has so many sacrifices, and life in general has so many sacrifices and crosses, that I think if we can just be upfront about that and say, yeah, Yeah, having a baby is no joke. Getting pregnant is no joke. It's a big, big deal. But there's also a little bit of randomness to life. I know, like, my parents were kind of, and I think our parents before were, even when they had choices about contraception, there's always been abortion. There's always been some form of contraception, herbs and stuff that women could take. There's always been something. But there was more of this, like, openness to God, like, okay, whatever you want to do, God, whenever you want to do it. Like, this a little more randomness to life, like leaving room for God to do what God wants to do when God wants to do it. But again, that will start with a relationship with God. If you don't have a relationship with God, you're not going to let him into this huge area of your life to do what he wants in your life. Are you kidding me? So I think it goes back to first of all, our love relationship with God, and being able to trust him that he's not going to destroy our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's and families that practice this natural family planning and are open to life, they that spirituality, that openness, that faith and trust is replete through all the rest of their lives, the other dimensions of their lives, their family, their households. Because we're talking about a fundamental worldview, not just about, well, in the bedroom it's between us two, whether we want to get pregnant or not, whether we think we can afford a kid or not. It's not. It's more than that. It's an entire way that you see. Because remember, is everything rises and falls on what happens in the bedroom. That's the sanctuary of the human race. That's precisely why you want God and the church there. You want him right there. Like I said, I'm gonna market this line of pop-up Pope things for the bedroom. Bing! You get all the candles, everything ready. Wait a minute, honey. Bing! Okay, we can start now. Church is in our bedroom. Pope's looking over. This is going to be great. Because everything, really, it's. Remember, the one flesh union between husband and wife is akin to the Eucharist. What happens, this Eucharist is the source and summit of our existence. What happens in worship, as this Pope always says, if you get worship right, in other words, the Eucharist, the synthesis, the nucleus, if you get that right, everything else gets right, because it flows in and out of that. Same thing with the bedroom. Think of the bedroom as being the counterpart of the Eucharist. It's entering the sanctuary of the human race, which there's even a tabernacle, that being the woman's womb, and the man being a priest who must approach the tabernacle as a priest approaches the tabernacle. So what happens there determines everything. And so if you're contracepting, you're not just doing it there. You're doing it within every other dimension of your life in ways you may not even realize. That's why this is such a fundamental teaching, why it's so pivotal for our time, our culture. For those that don't understand about the natural, one thing, maybe a little analogy might be, always think of how something is ordered. What belongs to the order of something? Because I think since they're confused, like if you're abstaining during fertile times, that's like contracepting. Is that what they're saying? Yeah. Okay, here would be the difference. Choosing to drink this coffee or choosing not to drink it, both of those choices are all within the order of drinking or eating, of consuming, right? In other words, someone says to me, would you like more coffee, Father? Oh, no thank you, had enough. Okay, that's all within the order of eating, right? Eating, you take and you also cease or refuse, right? Now, what would be out of the order would be if I drank the coffee and then threw it up. That's why that's unpleasant. That's not according to the order. That's a disorder. It only happens if you're disordered. Either you're bulimic or you're sick or the coffee is poisoned or something, you know. And no, that's a disordered thing. It doesn't belong to the order of eating or drinking. Okay, so contraception is the same way. Natural family planning is the same way. we can choose to drink or imbibe and participate at this time, or we can choose not to. It's all part of the order of procreation, which has its own rhythm. It was the rhythm of fertility and non-fertility was built into it. So non-fertile times are part of the order of procreation, and we simply kind of are involved in that rhythm, that order, which means there's times of participating and times of not participating. Now, contraception is like taking the coffee, or like eating and then throwing it up. Well, you're engaging in it, but you're not really. In other words, you're contra it. I'm contra drinking. I drink and I throw up. That's contra, against drinking. Or if you're eating, you eat like people with bulimia. I eat, then I go and throw it up. That would be contraceptive eating, because you ate, but you didn't really allow the process to be according to the order of eating. You ate and you throw it up because you didn't really eat. Therefore, you contradicted eating. And what word would be contraceptive? Or you contra-culinaried or something.
But you can't call natural family planning contraception, even though it's. Because I always wondered, like, why we say artificial contraception?
Right.
What's natural contraception?
Right.
So is NFP natural contraception?
No, because
No.
it's
not doing anything to obstruct.
right. NFP is not contra, because the keyword is contraceptive. It's not against the order of nature. It's it's like riding the wind, like the waves or something. The waves go up and they go down. The tide goes in, it comes out. There's times of fertility, times of non-fertility, and we engage. We're allowed to engage in that rhythm as we choose, but always, as Sister is saying, always with a certain openness that life may happen from this, even if we're engaging in non-fertile times. Life might still happen. Fine. That's.
So people could still practice NFP, but with a contraceptive mentality.
Yes, you're right. That's
doing it wrong.
Yes.
In the sense of like.
That's
shut down to life and absolutely determined not to be open to life.
That's why I know what you think, Sister. Maybe some of our viewers here, and all of you. What about this? Because sometimes we caution about not teaching that to teenagers, because you're giving.
Oh, whoops! There goes the camera.
Yeah. That's our song.
If you could just repeat that. Actually, I've heard that teens are practicing NFP now. As a natural, because it's more healthy, it's more green.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course it's
Gosh.
Of course,
Yes.
You know what? I still think we should teach it, and
Yes.
We might not have to get into all the details right now with them how to do it, but yeah, absolutely, you have to tell people that stuff. Everything can be abused in this world. Yeah. Every gift of God, and we abuse everything. Well, yeah, that's. Should I?
Yeah. He asked, is the green part because the estrogen's in the water?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And especially potential effects on men.
Some teens are practicing NFP, I've heard, as they have sex as teens, because they've heard it's effective too. It's like 99% effective. And also because it's more natural, and the girls are like waking up to, wow, I'm putting all these chemicals in my body. It's not good. I don't know. The word still really isn't getting out there about Dr. Ken Howell never heard that, about the estrogen in the water. Women are, for how many years, 40 years now, have been peeing out estrogen. Estrogen does not break down in the water supply. So men are ingesting estrogen. We're swimming in it, and women have double the estrogen. Breast cancer. Things like this. So it's a huge influence in the environment too. But the point was that we could practice NFP with a contraceptive mentality of, I am not open to light.
You mean all there's teenage girls running around the school and with their charts and all that? Well, nothing else. They'll get very good at it for when they are married. Yes, anything can be abused. Because again, it's context, it's intentionality. Remember, intention is part of what makes something a sin or not a sin. That's one of the elements is intention. All right, there's I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to page 57. There's a very good paragraph there, and the big paragraph in 57. This habit of confusing the order of existence with the biological order, rather allowing the second to obscure the first, is part of that generalized empiricism which seems to weigh so heavily on the mind of modern man, and particularly on modern intellectuals, and makes it particularly difficult for them to understand the principles on which Catholic sexual morality is based. According to those principles, sex and the sexual urge are not solely and exclusively a specific part of the psychophysiological makeup of man. The sexual urge owes its objective importance to its connection with the divine work of creation, of which we have been speaking, and this importance vanishes almost completely if our way of thinking is inspired only by the biological order of nature. Seen in this perspective, the sexual urge is only the sum of functions undoubtedly directed, from the biological point of view, towards a biological end, that of reproduction. Now, if man is the master of nature, should he not mold those functions, if necessary artificially, with the help of the appropriate techniques, in whatever way he considers expedient and agreeable? The biological order, as a product of the human intellect, which abstracts its elements from a larger reality, has man for its immediate author. The claim to autonomy in one's ethical views is a short jump from this. It is otherwise with the order of nature, which means the totality of the causative relationships that rise among really existing entities. It is therefore the order of existence, and the laws which govern it have their foundation in Him, who is the unfailing source of that existence, in God the Creator. See, what happens is sometimes when we explain theology of the body in the Catholic perspective, people say, oh, well, you're just saying biological determinism. And that's what he's correcting here. No, biology doesn't determine Catholic morality. Rather, biology is determined by the natural law. Knows biology, all creation is a manifestation, a participation in God's revelation. In other words, in His created order. Biology is just the way that participates, the way it manifests itself. So it's not biology determining things, it's God's laws, God's order that determines biology. And then we engage in both. We engage in biologically, through the prism of the created order. You get the difference? Because we're often accused of that. Oh, especially, I know a lot of times, like the feminists, married priests, or women priests, they say to me, like, because I explain the theology of the genders, and say, oh, well, just you're basing all in biology. We're biologically determined. No. We're not determined by biology. Biology itself is determined by revelation.
And Waldstein makes the point in the introduction to Theology that not to confuse the biological order, which is really our study,
yes,
and the way we frame things.
Yes, we frame, yes.
Which can be, can go off from the natural order. He says we got to keep going back to the natural order of creation itself.
Yes,
not
exactly.
The study of
biology, right. Right, that's the whole tension between, well, what I call real science. Well, actually, that's the tension between what passes for science today and the church. That's a very good question. Do we have to accept God to accept the natural law? It makes the most sense and works best that way, but you don't have to, because and that's the whole phenomenological approach of John Paul's thought, of everything from here to theology, body, everything. That, okay, let's not believe in God, but let's really experience and look at the natural order. and see what it seems to point to, what it's ordered to. Like, for instance, when I ask like about the one flesh union, sexual intercourse. Okay, how is it done? Is it done with just, how do people make babies? Do they join hands and the baby's made? Do they just join body parts and the baby's made? What is that action? What is it like? It's more like an embrace, isn't it? Isn't there more of the body involved? Like two people come together kind of more totally in intercourse? Is that how it works best? I think I'm a celibate. I don't know these things. I wasn't taught this somewhere. Isn't it? We would say it works best when the two people come together, the bodies. Okay, so what is that saying? What is that pointing to? What does it seem to imply? It seems to imply something having to do with more than just parts, more like the whole person, the whole body. There's a psycho spiritual thing going on there. Then you talk about the bonding hormones, if you want to get scientific and all that. There seems to be a bonding of the persons there. Whether you believe in God or not, just look at what's actually happening. What do they feel when they do that? Are they just totally disengaged mentally? Oh, there's a baby. They need a baby. Isn't there something that goes on all levels of the persons involved? Just as a scientific fact, if you can monitor their brains, brain waves, all that, yeah, something's going on there on other levels of them than just a few body parts. Well, it seems to be a total experience then. What does that say then? Well, it says it seems like that action is ordered to a total giving, a total receiving. Okay, just as a fact, all God aside, so we can do that. Just help. The thing is, to answer your question, if they experience the natural order, really honestly experience it, not influenced by agendas and prejudices. That's why I say honest science. Let's just be real objective, be really scientific. No beliefs, nothing. Walk through it, real detailed. Let's measure. Get the electrodes there. Let's measure the physiology. Let's get it real scientific about this. See, scientists aren't scientific enough. The church is waiting for the scientists. Come on, guys. Let's get more scientific here. They think that we're not scientific. No, it's the opposite. You guys aren't scientific enough. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, yeah. Just. And the AIDS virus, being spread through condoms because the pores and the condoms are this big and the AIDS virus is this big. Yes. Right. Fact. Right. Agenda, and it passes. Just like if you go to Catholic National Catholic Bioethics Center, and they've got over the years they've done some great testimonies on how, as you say, sister, the information on the breast cancer and abortion link and contraceptive link has been wantonly, scandalously suppressed by the National Catholic Institute, or National Cancer Institute. National Catholic Bioethics. They publish about 4 times a year a little pamphlet that updates you. There's a Dr. Joel Brind, I think his name was Brind, who presented. He came to present these papers at one of their big national conventions, and he wasn't allowed to. And they'll dismiss findings like that. They used to have it on their website, on their the National Cancer Institute used to actually say that there's studies show there seems to be a correlation between abortion, contraception, and breast cancer. They actually had it there. They took it off, and they will not allow any evidence to be brought forward at these conventions. You read the accounts, it's amazing. They literally, as you say, the National Cancer Institute has literally silenced any information that proves this link. And then we have this big charade in October. I can't stand it. It goes pink, pink, Total hypocrisy. We perpetuate what creates breast cancer, and then we act so sanctimonious like we're really helping to heal it. But again, real science. The church keeps looking for real science. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Every so often, like the science will
Yeah,
pop
it'll pop out.
and,
Yeah.
and if you miss it, you miss it, because it goes back down again.
Yes, it does.
It's very reputable. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it
not
does.
something that's not popular.
No, it's not.
All the myths are out there.
Just like, not in the same way. Why doesn't this stuff hit the public like smoking? We went after the tobacco companies, and smoking's bad. Man, that was very aggressive, very successful. Now you can't smoke any public buildings. It's almost unthinkable that we used to do that all the time. Restaurants that smoke. It's unthinkable, huh? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And why don't we go after these things as aggressively? No, we won't. And so it's a matter of true science. To answer your question, and that's why in our evangelization, in our defense of ourselves, and so on, which really I think should be an offensive. We should go on the offensive. You can help them by walking through the natural law very honestly, very scientifically. So yeah, you can talk about it without in a sense, non-sectarian. But the only thing, the difference is you'll come to is whether they will admit it. Like you'll come, like you can walk together with them. They come to that crossroad where for us the difference is this. And when I talked to this atheist one time, I said, "Gee, we're kind of in lockstep a lot of things here." But the difference is that the divergence point is, I as a believer or believers will take that next step and say, well, everything seems to point this way, and therefore we believe this. Whereas you guys will stop there. Even though you're right there with us, it points that way. But you won't take that leap and say, yeah, there's a personal, superior intellect behind all this. Everything points to that. See, in that way, they're not true scientists. They're not true. They're not being honest, because if everything points to something, then just like I challenged the one atheist, I said, you guys say that evolution, you accept evolution because you think that things point to that, and so you accept it. But yet there is no proof of it. You don't have proof of the different stages. You have no proof to explain the huge jump between, as we keep seeing here with all this, how the huge jump between the most sophisticated animal on earth and the human person. You do not show that or prove it. Yet you conclude, because you think the pattern points to that, so you make that jump and say, yep, we were created by evolution. Well, that's what we do with faith, but you won't do that. Why do you do it with this, which is faulty, whereas this over here, there is no fault. It's one thing points to the next, the next, the next, the next, the next. So you can lead them along, but ultimately they do have to choose. That's why we say faith ultimately is a gift. If they come to that point, and it's just blind. They put on the veil. But you can walk with them up to that point, pretty closely. You can. That's why, like Christopher, he gets. Listen, everybody cracks on Chris about what he said about Hugh Hefner. Of course, that was a soundbite. It was misinterpreted. But I say the same thing about Howard Stern. I would love to sit down with Howard Stern and walk with him like this. And we have to. We have to go after these kind of people. Because maybe there's a chance that if you walk with them through a natural law walk, because that's what they're into. They don't realize it, but they're really kind of appreciating an aspect of the natural creation. They're just not doing it in a mystical way, in a faith-based way. If you walk with them through that, see, they think we don't walk with them through that. They think we're all about just a bunch of, we're an institution based upon just moral rules and laws and a lot of no's. They're into experiencing life. They say, hey, look, sex is good. It feels good. Why not? Look, well, now with this, we can say, yeah, sex is great. Yeah, I agree with you. Almost everything you say about sex. But let's keep going. Okay, Howard, let's keep going. Talk about sex. Talk about the body. Keep going. Come on. Keep going. And then you'll bring him to that crossroad. Ultimately, they'll come to the crossroad if they dare to walk with you that long. And you can walk with them all the way without ever mentioning God, religion, nothing. You can act just like one of them. You're totally like two atheists, just picking your way through this thing. But then you're going to come to that point where it seems like everything has led you here. Can they make the jump? It ultimately comes down to a faith leap, and that's why it is a gift. But I think we have to in our day and age. This is why God put him here. God told us, you guys have to do this, people, and this guy's going to show you how to do it. So go do it. And don't be smacking people around who are trying to do it like Christopher West, Of natural. Okay, it's a natural law is our subjective and rational interaction with the laws of nature. There's natural law and there's the laws of nature. In other words, we look at, okay, how do things work? Rain falls out of the sky, gravity pulls things down. Okay, we, unlike the animals, we now engage in that intellectually and experientially. In other words, we say, okay, what is this about? Why does this do this? How does it work? Does it always work? What does it mean? Where does it come from? Okay, that's where we get to natural law. Because only we, the human creature, is the only creature that is able to engage in the laws of nature with intelligence and a subjectivity. In other words, we experience it in a way that we can reflect on it.
And we also are nature.
Yes.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah, I know.
But we are part of nature. Like, it's not just we're outside observers and we're like, we don't have no. Our bodies are totally subject to all the laws. That's what's so unique about human beings. And yet we can kind of step outside and look objectively.
That's why he keeps saying all the time. That's how it began too in our first class. That humans are subject and object at the same time, not either or. We are an object. But we can also reflect on our existence, on what we experience, and come to objective truths about it. See, what John Paul II knew, and I think God was trying to tell us, that the time has come when, let's face it, people. I think God was saying this to us. The Holy Spirit was saying, let's face it, people. You live in a modern age where people don't care who you are. They don't listen to you just because you're the Pope. They used to, but not anymore. I guess that pretty much ended in the 50s. So God is saying, I still want my truth to get out there. How do we do it? Well, everybody just is concerned about what they feel, what's important to them, not what you say. Who are you? You're just a guy like me. I don't care if you're a pope. Okay, fine. And now we got to go into what is real to them, what they experience. They can't just tell them anymore. You got to go into what they experience and help them to see from that. To come to objective truth, but through experience.
And Father Hogan,
at the Theology of the Body Congress, Father Hogan, who was a very early writer on Theology of the Body, he grabbed JP2 stuff and he did some of the earliest stuff on it. And he was saying that JP2 also corrected Kant, Immanuel Kant, he's the closest thing I think that the secular world has to like a morality and ethicists. They really love Kant because he had anyway, they really like him. But he was kind of in error about some stuff, and JP2 purified Kant, and he talked about experience, because for Kant, everything is experience. And JP2 said, yes, but authentic experience. So, and I think this is probably the objection a lot of people have to the phenomenologists, that if you just go by experience, some people could say, hey, I'm fine. I'm promiscuous and I'm happy. You know, and it could be, and actually because they could be living an inauthentic experience. So I think we do have to be careful, and maybe they haven't hit the low point yet in you know, whatever. So I thought that was a really good distinction about authentic experience and inauthentic. And I heard this Jesuit recently said something too about, like, we can spend our whole lives doing things wrong. And we can say, but that's my experience, you know, and try to like build on a doing things wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I call it a penetrating journey into our experience, a journey of honesty. That is, like, just like someone brought up before, like, we're happy or whatever. What do you mean by happy? Or like works? Yeah, like we're talking about same-sex activities. What do you mean it works? Someone says, well, it works. What do you mean it works? Okay, that's their experience, but let's look at that experience and see, as you say, is it authentic? Is it honest? Is it really producing the good that it could? It's just like Christopher Russ will use an analogy. He says that, you know, people are hungry, but they eat out of the dumpster and thinking that that's their experience. It's normal. I mean, the dumpster of life, right? Whereas we're come along and say, okay, you're hungry. Let's see what works best. You're experiencing dumpster food. That's all you know. And you figure, well, that's the way it is. We're saying, oh, no. Come and experience the home-cooked Thanksgiving meal that we're all going to enjoy pretty soon. Then let me know what you think is working, what's happy. Okay, we're just about out of time, and we'll pick this up later. I know there's a lot here, you know, so we'll just kind of move through it at the pace we can, I guess, you know. And and when we get back, I'd like to get through this chapter and start on chapter. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll try. We'll finish this next time, and then we'll start on chapter 2, the person in love. Let's get into the metaphysical analysis of love. There's just so much great stuff in here, really. Just very, very. It's not nearly as thick as Theology Body, but boy, it's packed.
Easier to understand.
Yeah, easy to understand. Yeah. If you could, yeah. Finish this one and read through the next one. Yeah. And we'll meet again in December, right? Second.
If any of the new people want to leave an email, we can send out the notes afterwards to you and just let you know about the shows and stuff. So anybody that is not on our email list, can send the email. How did you hear about it?
Yeah. Okay, because I don't never get it live. Since I'm working on the archives. Oh yeah, I was gone for. I think the latest they still have up to September. Oh really? Yeah. It's that far behind. Oh really? Yeah. Wow, the archive. Yeah, but it does say we're working on the archive. Oh, okay. You're gonna be. Oh yeah. You gonna do that show or? Oh yeah, I do it every week. I saw on TV they had two. Oh yeah, two other priests. Yeah, there's two priests that did that. So they're separate. The radio on TV. Yeah, they're different. We both ended up with the same name. Shows. I know those priests are from our church. The other one was like, you know that priest that's converted Muslims? Oh no, yeah. He's a TV show. Really? Over in Egypt. Yeah. Really? He's converted like 6 million Muslims. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I sure need that. Yeah, he's
gonna need security.
Yeah. No, they said they have a jihad against them.
Oh yeah.
You know, we just had that Chaldean church, that tragedy in Baghdad.
Yeah.
Right.
I talked about that on my radio.
No, I hear that, but they never say how we help us.
Yeah, I know.